Hey guys, welcome back. I'm Summer with Summer Sweet Shop, and I am excited to talk to you because today we're talking about you finally decided you're going to teach a cookie class. And you're like, okay, I've decided, now what? Right? So you're like, what do I teach in my first cookie decorating class? And I'm also going to tell you what things that you can skip. So I've been teaching cookie classes for over 6-7 years now, and I am here to tell you that when I first started teaching cookie classes, I made a lot of mistakes, and I thought I just need to include more. I need to include more things. I need to include more techniques. I need to include more supplies. I need to include more cookies, and I need to include more icing colors, right? And that was not the case. So and I learned the hard way that was not going to serve me or my students very well. And when you make your classes overwhelming to your students, it's not going to turn out really well. And honestly, it's not going to make you feel well at all. And that's probably the most important thing is you want a class that is going to be fun for you as well to teach, not only for you to teach it, but also for your students to experience as well. So today we're talking about what to include in your class and what you can leave out and not worry about. And that might be the most important part, is what things that you need to leave out of your class versus what things you need to include. So I want you to take away these nuggets of information, and hopefully they help you as you are prepping and planning for this cookie class that you've decided you're going to teach. When I wanted to give my students the kitchen sink and everything, what happened was my students left overwhelmed. They left exhausted. I was exhausted at the end of the class, and nobody had very much fun because they were overwhelmed and frustrated, myself included. And I really learned after a few classes, I learned when the magic happens is when you simplify a lot of things, not just simplifying your designs, but really simplifying your prep, your setup, your class designs, your icing, your techniques, right? Your step-by-step instructions. When you teach less, students are actually able to learn more. It's that false narrative of more equals more value. Absolutely not. I don't want you to believe that for a second. I knew that when I started doing teaching less and not giving them as much, I had students who were more successful. I had students that were wanting to come back over and over again to my class. And we're going to go over some things today on what are some tips of things that you can do from those classes, some mistakes that I made and learned from, so that you don't make those same mistakes and you start out on the right foot as you start this cookie class endeavor. So we have 3 things that we're going to highlight today of what to include. And then at the end, we're also stay to the end because we're going to talk about the things that you can skip and that you don't need for that class. Like I said, that is kind of almost more important than the things to do. But number 1 is you want to choose 2 to 3 cookie designs. And you want to keep them simple. When I say you want to limit your designs, I typically will do anywhere from 3 to 6 cookies. But you can, if you want to do 6, you could do 3 cookies or 3 designs, but 2 cookies of each design. Or you're keeping those colors that you are using very limited. Because number 1, you don't want to be spending hours upon hours upon hours making your icing and making bags of icing. Number two, it is you want to just simplify that for your students. If they have 10 different icing colors in front of them, that's going to be very overwhelming. Okay. So it's tempting to really want to show them everything and say, oh my gosh, I got to show them this technique, and I got to show them wet on wet, and I got to show them marbling, and I got to show them piping this detail, and I got to show them how to letter on a cookie, and I got to show them how to make a flower over here. And that's very overwhelming for someone who's a beginner. And you have to remember, when you're teaching a beginner class and you open up that registration for a beginner class, you're talking to someone who probably has never picked up a piping bag before, or you have to assume that. Maybe they've only decorated cookies at the holidays, or they've only done this one other time, or maybe they haven't done it ever before. That's what you have to think about, is who is that beginner person that that you can help along the way with some simple guidance so that they're not overwhelmed, because they're all going to come into your class and say, oh, my cookies are not going to look like that. And you want to confidently say, yes, with the right instructions and guidance and encouragement, your cookies can look like these as well. And you want to feel confident that that statement can be true that you tell them. You want to have cute and approachable cookie designs. You don't want to have ones that are overly complicated. So I really encourage you to, even though maybe you're a cookier that's been decorating for 2, 3, 4, 5+ years, I want you to remember, what are those basic things that you know about cookie decorating? Outlining and flooding, wet on wet techniques, so adding polka dots, maybe some lines, adding some details afterwards. You don't want to create that overwhelm. And you've also got to think about your drying time. So that's the trickiest part, I feel like, when it comes to planning a cookie class, is your drying time. You're looking at an 1.5 to a 2-hour time span. And we all know that royal icing takes time to set up. And you can't just flood a cookie and then flood another layer on top of that and expect it to turn out perfect like you do for your custom sets. So you have to think about that ahead of time, and have designs that are not too complicated, that you don't need an excessive amount of time for that icing to dry and set up. You want to use you want to use the icing consistency that you're most comfortable using. If you decorate your cookies in one consistency, then you probably should teach with one consistency. If you're like me and you're more comfortable teaching 2 consistencies because that's how you decorate your cookies, then stay with your consistencies. Whatever is the most comfortable for you. We have lots of people in our Cookie Classes to Cash membership who teach with one consistency, where all of my instructions are 2 consistencies, because your icing comes out as piping icing already. So there's not much thought process to that. But your flood icing is what we're going to achieve, what they're going to have to fill in those cookies. It's extremely hard to get that hybrid in between icing that is going to work for outline and for flood. So honestly, I just don't like spending the time trying to get to that consistency, because it just frustrates me. So I will take an outline and a flood all day long, okay? And then your students might feel that same way, that it could be hard for them to outline on an icing that is a little thinner. It's not giving as much of a barrier for when they flood that cookie. Or if that flood icing, if that hybrid icing is a little too thick, it's going to take longer for that icing to set up, and they're going to get frustrated, because a lot of times what happens when a beginner cookier comes to your class, they outline and then they fill in the cookie, and they almost always don't fill it up enough. So there should be a lot more icing on there because they're a little nervous. That's okay. But they're also a lot slower. So the icing, especially if you're living in a dry climate, It's going to set up quick. And as you know, if you're adding polka dots or you're doing another element, it's important that they work a little bit faster. So I think it's more important. I think it's better to have those two consistencies, your outline and your flood, and make your flood a little bit thinner so that they get that settle out on their icing without having to do too much. And they're not going to run out of time. It's not going to matter if they are a little bit slower. The icing is going to smooth out just beautifully. And then number 3 is being able to decorate your cookies in 90 minutes or less, or like 90 minutes to 2 hours, I should say. You don't want to plan a cookie set to do and you end up being in this class for 3 or 4 hours, okay? I want you to make sure that you can achieve these designs in 90 minutes to, 180? Like 90 minutes to 2 hour class, 120. So keep that in mind as you are picking out your designs. You want them approachable, you want them cute and adorable, so they're gonna like bring people to the class, but you wanna make sure that you keep them simple so that they are achievable and your students will leave super excited. So some of the ones that I like to do for like the fall, I love to do pumpkins are a great one to do. I love to do hearts. I love to do flowers. You can do ornaments at Christmas time. You can do different ones like that and keep them kind of seasonal. So it makes it super fun for your students. They can take them home and be super proud of them, showing them their friends and their neighbors and their family all these beautiful cookies that they decorated with you. All right, number 2 is keep it beginner friendly. We've already touched on this some, but you want your students to not need to know everything about cookie decorating when they sit down. You want to focus on the basics, which are outlining and flooding a cookie, adding some simple details to those cookies, and using how to use a piping bag without being totally awkward. That's why we always give them a royal icing practice sheet to practice getting used to that. If you set them down there with the bags of icing and a cookie, they're gonna be really nervous to start. It's like when you buy a house for the first time and everything's all painted beautifully and you've gotta go put a hole and hang something on the wall, right? I'm the one that's like not hanging up something for like a year because I don't wanna put a hole in a wall, right? They're gonna feel that same way. Like, oh, I don't wanna no, you and I both know they can just scrape off that cookie if they mess up. It's gonna be okay. But they don't know that. They don't know that. So you got to assume. So that's why I love the royal icing practice sheets so that they can practice and get comfortable how that icing's coming out, how that flood icing feels, because a lot of it is muscle memory. And you want them to feel like that, saying like, this is the icing consistency. When you say this is like maple syrup, they're not going to know what you mean. So you got to show them. And that's where that comes in handy. Okay. The goal, I want you to remember, is you're not turning them into pros, right? They're not going to become cookier masters overnight, right? You want them to have that fun experience. We talked about in the last lesson is you want them to have a fun experience. You want them to have great success, and you want them to come back over and over again, essentially. And number 3 is make your class fun and not stressful. When you really cut back on those extra details, our classes for cookie classes to cash that you get each month, they barely have any writing where we're writing a word, because I know that that's intimidating for a person. When I first started in this field, I started with cakes. I took a cake decorating class from Michael's Craft Store and started making cakes after that for like friends and families and showers and stuff. And I remember getting so nervous about writing happy birthday on a cake. Like I would have sweaty armpits and everything, just super, super nervous about having to write happy birthday on a cake. And I want you to think about that your students have that same anxiety and stress when you put a really detailed design in front of them that you are having to explain a lot about, that is more intermediate, advanced level technique than what they are comfortable with. So I want you to make sure that you give them beginner-friendly designs. I want you to give them beginner-friendly techniques, and help them with any tips that you have along the way. The things that you wish people would have said to you when you first started decorating. What are some things that you learned really quickly that were helpful, that just kind of eased all of that? And just remember that they're there to laugh, to have fun, to socialize, to relax, right? I know we think, oh, how's this relaxing? It can be. We know that it can be. And here's a good kind of rule of thumb, that if you are stressing over whether is this too much? Should I include this? It probably is. And because you've been doing this a while, more than likely, have you gotten used to it? You know icing consistency, you know what you're doing, right? But they don't. So I want you to remember, just take that road that it's probably not as comfortable for them, and less really is more. So I told you we were going to talk about what things to skip in your first class. So we're going to talk about that. Number one is I want you to skip those complicated designs that have multiple layers. Remember, you got to think about, you've got 2 hours in this class or 90 minutes, and that icing has got to set up. And you can't just flood a whole cookie and then expect to add another layer on top of that. So take away all of those complicated designs and say, or simplify them down so that they are achievable for a beginner. I don't want you to use too many icing colors and consistency. What's funny is if you make this mistake, you'll make it one time and one time only. Because after you've made 6 or 7 different icing bags, you will never do that again for a class of 20 people. You're like, that's never going to happen again. So make sure you're not using too many icing consistencies. In our cookie classes to Cash, we try to stick to 4 icing colors. And we do that religiously as much as we can, because I don't want you spending all of your time making icing. And plus, the more icing colors that you have, it's going to be more details that you are going to be giving to your students. So I want you to skip, this is a big one, I want you to skip the long lectures about royal icing science. Okay, I don't want you to be spending all of the first 30 minutes of class talking about icing consistency and what piping consistency is like, and passing around a bowl with icing so they can feel it. They don't need that. And more than likely, that's not why they came to the class. Now, if you want to do a separate class that is all about the basics of baking your cookies and making your royal icing, absolutely, that's the class for them. But this is a class where you have 4 to 6 designs where they're coming for fun and entertainment. They're not taking this too seriously. So I don't want you to take it too seriously. If they want to learn more about that royal icing and how does it crust over and how do I avoid craters and how do you get shiny icing, that's when you need to do maybe that really beginner class. So don't get caught up in going into tons of detail about your icing consistency. I always say that they need to know about piping consistency and flood consistency, or really whatever is the consistency that they're going to be using that day. Okay. And number 4 is I want you to stop trying to fit in advanced techniques like florals or lettering in your classes. Wet on wet is fun to do, and people always love to do one on wet, especially with polka dots. But save the lettering and the florals for an intermediate or advanced classes. And I say that because they're advanced techniques, right? They're going to be harder to learn, and you don't want your students to leave frustrated, to feel overwhelmed, and to feel defeated, honestly. And so if you have lettering on your cookies, sometimes that we do have lettering in some of our classes, we keep it super simple. It's like XOXO, right? Like you're just drawing the lines, and we keep it really, really simple because I don't want them to feel overwhelmed. Also, if they see those pictures ahead of time and that class is listed and they see these really overcomplicated designs and sets, they're going to say, I really don't want to do that. Like, I don't think that I'm going to do that. And they're going to feel defeated before they even purchase a ticket. And they're not going to come to the class. So keep it simple, keep it achievable, and they are going to be flocking to come to your cookie class. So I want you to save those items that you're going to skip. Save that for your classes and what you want to bring to your first class. So if you want to join us in Cookie Classes to Cash, we would love to have you. You get 2 monthly classes dropped every single month with not only the designs and the step-by-step instructions, but also the marketing material to help you get butts in the seats so that you're not having to spend all of that time on social media figuring out how to talk about it, what to say about your class, what email do you need to write. We make it so easy for you to focus on the fun, on bringing an amazing class and experience for your students. So check it out if you want. We're also doing a workshop in a few weeks all about the Cookie Class Bootcamp, how to teach, market, and sell out your cookie classes. So come join us. It's going to be great. And I look forward to seeing you guys there. So thanks so much. Look below for all of that information, and I will see you next time. Bye, guys.